And in some ways, it feels like every job is pulling at like a different part of you. So like the part of me that when I go to Hawaii Five-0 and I talk about the fact that I had a big brother who was a surfer and we watched Red Dawn all the time. And like, that's what I grew up with. And like, that provides me context for exactly how to do 5-0, you know, like, but then I go to Little America and I grew up in New York. And so it's a Belizean woman who's coming to a Hasidic community. And I'm like, oh, we lived at Pico Robertson for 5 years and I have a ton of, you know, so it's like these different things, you know, these really little like stars in your universe that you get to go access. And I think that's the thing I love about this the most is the exploration, because it's like, I might know a little bit about the orphanage, but then I had to go dive into it, right? Then I had to go, like the prayer of it is to go dive into that world and try to make it as authentic as possible and to like live in that world and inhabit it. And and how lucky are we to do that? Like that's the best stuff, right?
Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is a podcast on directing for anybody that's, quite simply, ever watched anything. Visit PeteChapman.com to get your official podcast merch, hoodies, hats, jackets, mugs, and other swag, and learn more about your host.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is sponsored by the good folks at Scriptation. Scriptation is the Emmy Award-winning app for production that allows you to mark up scripts, transfer notes, generate breakdowns, and so much more. No matter where you fall on the call sheet, Scriptation makes it easy to go paperless, collaborate with your crew, and save hours of time. Go to scriptation.com/Pete to learn more and receive a special offer exclusive to Let's Shoot listeners. Now, on to the show. Welcome to episode 69 of the show. This is Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman, and today's guest is Tara Miele. Tara is a super talented director of both film and television. Her feature film work includes Wander Darkly, starring Sienna Miller and Diego Luna, and her diverse television work includes Batwoman, Little America, and the Emmy-nominated Lessons in Chemistry, starring Brie Larson, Lewis Pullman, and our episode 65 guest, and now Emmy-nominated actress, Asia Naomi King. Now, before I chat with my fellow East Coaster, I must share that I'm recording this away from my home studio, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet to minimize your exposure to this audio setup that I've got. So, the catch-up.
Catch-up.
I started prep on episode 306 of Yellow Jackets. It's a great script. It's a really, really, really great script. It's a great season. As you know, I have to read all of the episodes prior. So I've read the first 5 episodes so I can know what's going on in the world of Yellow Jackets. And hats off to Ashley, Bart, and Jonathan for what they've done with this season. It's really great. That's Ashley Lyle, Bart Nickerson, and Jonathan Lisco, the team behind the show. So excited. I think it's coming to y'all in 2025, but I'll share more with my prep process as I can. The sets are also really impressive. The locations are really impressive. This week is currently the big prep week where I'm figuring out what my design for the episode will be. So I'm just excited to be at that stage of the process. So that's the catch-up. The catch-up is caught. The catch-up is quick. Let's get to it. This is episode 69. Tara Miele.
Roll sound.
Speed.
The interview. Take 1.
All right, Tara, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to talk about whatever we're going to talk about. We're going to find out.
Amazing. First of all, I just have to say, I love that you say my name like a New Yorker because you say Tara, which is like nobody in LA can do that. And my family
What do they
you.
say? Do they say Tara?
They say Tara, but it's my own fault. Like I moved from Long Island to California when I was 11 and everyone was like, what's your name? And I was like, Tara. And they were like, what is it? Is it Tara or Tara? And I was like, Tara. And they were like, we can't say that. Like you have to pick one. So I picked Tara. That was like 11-year-old me like locked it in.
Yeah, you got to. I mean, the New York roots go strong. I
Yeah.
actually just did a show in New York, and I was telling my wife, she's like, "How's it going?" I was like, it's going great. And it's like, I didn't know if they liked me for 3 days. You know what I mean? And I was like, this feels right, versus
That's right.
some places you go and you're kind of like, everybody seems to love me. But I like that it had some little drawbridge of earning that had to lower before I
Yeah.
could
And then
enter the castle.
once you're in, right? Like it's a
Right.
real in, as opposed to LA where you're like, oh, I don't really know. Everyone's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's my best friend. Just met him yesterday. So tell me, so you're from Long Island, what was it like growing up, and when did you say, I'm gonna write and direct and be nominated for DGA awards and all that?
I grew up on the South Shore of Long Island, little town called Lindenhurst, very blue collar, Irish, Italian, Catholic family. Like everybody around me was pretty similar. And my parents were crazy hippie liberals that moved us out to California. And I think from the time I was pretty little, my parents were pretty big on getting us to the city and showing us culture and taking us to Broadway and museums and all that stuff. And I think I was 3 years old and saw Annie on Broadway. And I was this curly haired little kid. And I saw that kid up there and I was like, I'm going to do that. Some version of that is in my future. And so I was acting a lot. When I came to Thousand Oaks in California, I found a little youth theater group and started acting with that great group of people. And those guys, it's funny because we've gone everywhere. There's kids on Broadway. There's that group of people has kind of gone everywhere, which is cool to see. And then my first job ever was as an assistant director to the little kid shows. So Amanda Bynes was running around in our little junior shows. And yeah, I was an AD. And I think it's interesting because a lot of the directors were women. I think that had maybe a lot to do with me eventually thinking oh yeah, I could do that. But I went to school for acting and felt a little bit maybe I was at summer camp and I wasn't totally engaging in it. I wasn't feeling it was a good challenge for me personally, which I guess the professors agreed with. I got kicked out of my acting program at UCSB and was devastated, was so devastated, and really sort of felt I just never want to have that sort of personal rejection again. And a friend of mine dragged me to the student film screening. And I remember sitting in this pot-filled room in Santa Barbara at Isla Vista Theater and watching these 8mm prints run through the projector with lice tape on them and some guitarist up there. And I was like, oh my God, someone made that. I literally had never, grew up a huge film fan. My family was huge film fans. My mom went into labor watching The Godfather. We have this film kind of appreciation, but never knew a single person in the business. And I was just oh my God, I'm a director. I'd been directing in theater and didn't like the lack of control. My dad's an engineer. My mom's a teacher, a writer. It all kind of came together for me that that was where I belonged. So that was a long time ago. I ended up making a student film that went to Slamdance after a few semesters of sort of getting my feet wet, and interned for Jodie Foster.
Where were you going to school?
Yeah, I was at UCSB, which has an incredible theory and film history program and not a huge production program. But in retrospect, it was so great for me because I got to do one of 4 senior thesis projects that went off to festivals and stuff. And I think probably had I been at somewhere like USC or UCLA, I would have come off. So it was a really great program for me.
How much of that summer camp acting experience did you bring, or do you bring, into your work now, whether it's working with actors or the performative aspect of a director's career, which is meetings and all that comes with it?
Oh my God, it's such a smart question. Yeah, so I continue to sometimes take an acting for non-actors class because I actually still deeply really love it. And because I'm a writer, I think I spend a lot of time talking to myself and performing things out. And even on set, there's times where if I can't make sense of something, I'm processing it almost as an actor before I can talk to the actor to give them and like I've had somebody say to me before, like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm just in the moment. Sorry. Like I'm like processing an emotion of why that hurts so much, or like figuring out the story for that character of why that hurt the way it does, or how to get somebody deeper into something. And then, yeah, it's true. I remember when I started pitching as a writer, feeling like I really liked pitching and writers hated pitching. And I was like, it's like I get to go do a one-woman show for the head of Warner Brothers. Like, this is great, like, and I was like, if I can make that guy cry or laugh, that's like, that's good fun, like, so I do like that piece of it, honestly. Like, and I do find what's tricky, and I'm sure you feel this too, or I'd be curious to hear about your take on this. Directing can be such a public job. Like you're so in the spotlight, right? Like whether you're like it's working or your face in the sand getting crushed by a failed plan, like everybody's watching. And to turn off the feeling of performance is really hard sometimes. Or, like that's actually I like that. I feel like somehow being a director makes me turn off the performance piece. Like I'm so in it. That I'm not doing that,
I love when they say, let's do a private rehearsal, and you look over your shoulder and there's 12 people, and you're like trying to like, you're like, I'm not really sure like how this is going, or it's that first couple scenes with the actors and you haven't worked with them before and you're like, are they fucking with me? Like,
always a little bit.
Yeah, like, do they just not believe in stage directions? And you do have, and everyone's watching how you navigate that. It's and what you do or don't do gets run up the chain, to people as to how life on set with you is going to be for the next 9 days. So yeah, you're always on.
But it does feel still to me, I think, thank goodness, like really playful. Like I like to be playful in that space, and I enjoy it so much. So like, yeah, it's always like a little intense. And sometimes I'm like, oh, an actor wants to come to set and they've got the script and they haven't had a chance to talk to anybody, and they could be upset about something. They might not understand something. They might be in season 8 and hate everyone. Like you never know, but they need to kick the tires a little bit. And sometimes you're the tires. So I think like after a long time, I've stopped worrying that like, oh, is it me? Or try not to. Maybe it doesn't always work.
I'm going to use that.
Human.
That is a very, very like spot on metaphor or analysis of what's going on.
Yeah. It's like helps you make it not about you. It's really hard though. Like you're as vulnerable as anyone, and you're supposed to go in and be so certain. And like, sometimes you're carrying orders from a showrunner that you think is probably wrong, and like navigating how do you talk to an actor when you know that like you're giving a no tough thing for them, and you're sort of that weird middle man. Well,
no, I mean, I would recommend acting for all directors in some way, shape, or form, because to be in concert or to understand like what it is to expose yourself as an actor day in and day out is something that you can only really appreciate once you've done it, even on, the smallest of levels.
Do you act too?
I've done it in my own work, but that's years ago at this point. I do feel like I have an understanding of what the actor's process may be, but I also feel like I could be better.
Well, you're married to an actor.
There's that too. So that I get to see it, and we get to benefit from each other because like, like sometimes on an audition, I'll be like, I think this is maybe the thing to lean into.
Oh, that's great.
Just looking at this scene, I have an idea of probably what they're going to respond to. But yeah, it's a great symbiotic thing. Now, so after UCSB and you had the short film and you said, correct me if I'm wrong, did you say Slamdance?
Got to Slamdance, and I was such like a wide-eyed little baby, just running around. It's just such a random story, but like at the time, this was like in 2000, so this is like a long time ago. There was this website called den.net that was like, we're going to replace television on the internet. I mean, wild, right? Like pre-Netflix, right? Crazy idea. And I think the owner like snorted all the money up his nose and it went away. But we convinced them to pay to take our crew to Slamdance and shoot a documentary about us going to Slamdance and then like air the short. And then they did that. So there's this like Reality Bites trailer of like me at 22 at Slamdance with all these people, and they're like trying to make drama out of it, you know, but it's a pretty great like little record of time. And but then it turns out our short was based on this story that was written by a guy, Charles Beaumont, who used to write for like Twilight Zone and Corman and all those guys. And his estate wouldn't give us the full rights to it. So like they paid for us to all go out there and as if we owned the short, and we didn't. And thank God they like folded before they sued us. And like,
wow.
So anyway,
wow.
so Slamdance. And I think what happened was I was working as an assistant. I was trying to climb 2 ladders at the same time. I was like, I'll keep doing short films. I'll work as an assistant so I can meet people. And
now, was that when you were working on The Mind of the Married Man on HBO?
I did. I worked on Mind of the Married Man. Yep. And that was a great little training ground. I met Bruce Paltrow, who is Gwyneth's dad, who is a big producer and director. And he really took me under his wing. Thought, what a great New Yorker. He used to sit and do the crossword in between takes. I like loved Bruce. And he was really supportive. And he told me he saw another short I had done and was like, you have to write. Like, you just have to write. And so I started writing because of Bruce. And
When did you discover that you had taste?
Taste. God, that's a nice, flattering question. You know, it's funny. It's like you look back even to like when you were a kid. I think I knew from a pretty early age that I had pretty specific taste. That like I had something like outside of maybe what was always the normal thing, and that I liked to build things in a specific way, like some version of an alternative way for myself, like whatever that was. And even if you think about like being some blue collar kid from Long Island who decides they're going to go work in film, like it just was not, you know, like I was always sort of looking like just to the left of like the path that everybody was on. And so I think that's maybe it was just a sense of an ability to look outside the box, and also just being such a storyteller. And so like really like, I mean, I used to sit and like build classrooms of kids that were like characters that were students that I, you know, and they all had like, I would draw them all and give them all grades and you know, I thought I was playing school, but really I was like creating a whole universe of characters and dramas to like play out and to be in charge of, you know?
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's like, and that taste is always evolving too. Like what I thought I liked 5 years ago, what I thought was like the thing is now different. What I'm interested in pursuing is always changing. And I'm very, I don't want to say mercurial, but like curious to a fault in a way. Like I always want to do something new. I get really bored. I don't want to do the thing I already did, which probably drives my agents crazy because that's the easiest thing to get me. It's the thing I just did. Yeah.
Yeah, I asked because I was just thinking about this post I saw on Instagram, and I forget who it was, the quote was attributed to, but they were talking about how there's a point where like we get into this as artists with a belief that we have a point of view and a certain taste. And then it is the belief in the value of that taste that keeps us going when our execution does not meet our taste. You know what I mean? So like over a long, so you just know like, you know, maybe inherently or like just, you know it specifically, like over a long enough timeline, if I just keep doing this thing, there will be a point where it's a handshake and my taste is being met by what my abilities are.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful idea. I mean, certainly I'm always looking at stuff that like Denis Villeneuve is doing and going like, God damn, you know, like how, wow, you know, even the Daniels, my oldest kid is obsessed with Swiss Army Man, and we were watching it again last night for the bazillionth time together. And like the way that they can execute special effects and visual effects in a seamless, dreamy, dynamic, emotional way, I was like, God, it's so impressive, you know? So yeah, I think that's a beautiful idea that like your ability is always chasing your dream, like the vision in your head. I hope I get there someday. I don't know that I've ever created anything where I'm like, yep, that was like literally in total. Like there's pieces, right? Where like, that's just how I imagined it.
Yeah.
Do you think you've ever hit it?
I think that's, I would equate it to maybe the athlete being in a zone, right? You'll never be in a zone for a whole game, but or match or whatever it is that you're playing. But you can get into that place where the top of the third quarter, first 4 minutes, I was in a
Yeah,
zone.
that was yeah.
I couldn't miss. The basket was as big as a garbage can, and I couldn't, I didn't even know everything I was doing. And I feel like that has probably happened on a scene or two. There have been times, there have been times where you just know what you're doing is what you envisioned plus some.
That's right. Like that magic when you're on set, when things are coming out of you that you don't even know where it's coming from, and you're just in that moment. Yeah.
So that's the journey, right? So after Bruce Paltrow kind of gives that much needed pat on the back that can keep us going in the beginning or in the lean years, what was next up for you?
Yeah, so it's been such a roller coaster, right? So I wrote a feature. Bruce was like, I'll get it to Gwenny. She loves this shit. Go write it. I'll get you money. And then Bruce passed away, literally 6 months after that moment for us. But I did get my first manager off of that. I was working with a writing partner. And then we took us a couple of years and we sold our first script that got me into the Writers Guild. And then immediately they were like, don't buy a house, don't buy a car, don't have a baby. We're about to go on strike. And
so
I was
that
a strike captain in 07.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I was a baby strike captain running Sony in 2007. But I would say it was about 5 years after that, when you're just that baby writer, you're sort of the first one to get kind of cut down. And we were coming out of the strike in 2008 and I was pregnant. I was losing my benefits. We could not sell a thing. And I just remember thinking I'd been in LA for 7 years. I didn't even want to write. I wanted to direct. I was still struggling, I'd done some corporate videos. I'd directed theater, but I was not directing film, which I knew was what I was supposed to be doing. And it did not feel close at all. It didn't even feel I had sold a script to New Line at the time. And I remember being in with the executives. And even the fact that I had sold it, they were you're young, female, and a writer. There was no way they were looking at me I had any opinion. And I quit everything. I had right down. I left my writing partner. I broke up with my agent, my manager. I was I quit the business. I'm just I was I'm made for more than developing stacks of scripts that no one's ever going to see. I can't.
Right.
This just isn't right for me. I was I'm going to go join the Peace Corps. And then I went to the doctor. She would go to therapy. And I went to therapy, did some yoga. And then I got an email from a friend of a friend who was I just graduated Columbia Film School and I've got $100,000, a house in Lake Michigan, a pickup truck and a dog. And I'm looking for a director and a writer to make a movie this summer. And I was oh shit, I have to go do this. So I convinced that wonderful woman, Jennifer Weston, who is now a huge indie producer, we should do this. And she wanted to shoot in August, but I was due in August. So I convinced her to shoot in June. And I did not have a script, but I had an idea that I told her I had a treatment on, but I didn't really have a treatment on it. And I was let me just rework it for Michigan and I'll send it to you tomorrow. And I went home that night and I wrote it overnight and sent it to her the next morning. And she was is this crazy? And I was this is crazy. We should totally do this.
Right.
And we went and made that movie. And that was my first feature. And I was very pregnant in 2009.
So I always like to, certain things make me want to pit stop. And I'm wondering what in your experience up until that moment made you believe that you had to say, I've got this treatment rather than, I don't telling the truth. I don't have anything.
Why did I fib about that?
Yeah.
I want to add, she didn't really have the money, turns out. She had to go get
we were all lying.
We fibbed each other.
Right.
God, what did it make? Yeah. I mean, look, I had never even written anything on my own at that point. So I don't know what madness desperation, right? Man, I think I had just sat across from so many people at that point who were like, no,
Yeah.
like even women who were like, but who's
Yeah.
gonna, like you can't do it. Like they just
Yeah.
didn't see it. And so I think I felt like if I told her I was starting from scratch, she would feel like that's too
Yeah.
far. But if I
Right.
said I've got a treatment, like I know what the movie is,
Right.
I just would have to bust it out, And this was like April or something. Like I was 4 months pregnant already
Right.
and convincing her that we could make a movie together in June that wasn't written yet. So I think I just felt like, let me just get it like that much closer to the finish line for her to feel comfortable. Yeah, man, my career is built on a house of lies, Pete. It's
Hey,
like,
look, it what's not, It's like you have to prolong the no. That's
you
what I
prolong the
get. It's
no.
prolong the no. Like if I can hold off a no until, like, when I was raising money for projects, like, unless you told me outright, do not come to me with this again. Do not
Yeah.
ask me again. Like, you were going to get asked again. Like when I got another element together, or when I had a new event, like I was going to be back. And there's just an engine that you have to have as an indie filmmaker in particular, that I think really translates well to a career in an industry that's not exactly clamoring for you to show up.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. But I think that's why I really connected to you. So we did that thing at the Academy not that long ago that was a director's craft thing, and they broke apart our personalities. And I've had a good friend of mine who's like very successful Peabody winning journalist was like, geez, you're like a dog with a bone. But like, I'm going to take that as a compliment, because you're right. I am like relentless, right? Like that's it. Like you have to convert the thing. So if it takes 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 tries to convert the thing, it doesn't matter. You just have to convert the thing. But I remember seeing something like a lot of the other directors had like empathy as their strengths and all these like wonderful qualities. And you and I were like ambition and like drive and like, and I was like, oh yeah, I get Pete. I see Pete, I mean, I think I'm empathetic. I think I have all those things, but
it's
definitely
there.
like,
it's there, but like, something's got to come in first and second place,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Get it done.
Empathy as your 10th quality is still empathy.
So, thank you. I feel better.
So that's awesome. So when did TV begin to become something that you were thinking about?
Yeah. So just to like catch like so I did that short film, I got that feature, and then that actually got me 3 like micro budget Lifetime movies back to back. So I was at least getting paid. I was going broke paying the nanny, but I was getting paid to direct, which was huge. And then Hanalei Culpepper, who I knew from our short film days, had done that. And then she started doing the programs, like all the directing programs. And she had made the jump to TV. And I just remember thinking like, oh, that's how I can actually make a living. Yeah. And really there was just this moment, like I did the CBS program, Me Too and Time's Up happened. And it was like, I was, I'd been primed and I directed 4 features and I was still shadowing on 7 shows. And then all of a sudden, like the gates to the field open and I was allowed on. And so my first episodes of TV were Hawaii Five-0, doing these giant explosions and
what year
running
is
around
that?
with those guys. That was, oh my gosh, 2016 maybe.
Okay. I feel like we're probably the same age, and we had the same kind of window that opened. Like the timing of that window or that door opening is similar for both of us.
Yeah. I mean, it was a long time, right? Where you like, I was working, but wasn't really making a living. I mean, it was good and bad, but mostly not great.
Yeah.
And then TV came in.
It was, you were doing like, you were really honing your craft, I'm sure, but it was on in a forest where no one heard the trees falling, and to use the cliche. But like you were really doing, you were doing more than most working directors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In terms of like skill set building
and
exactly, which meant you were primed to do well when given the opportunity.
And I also like, it's funny because I've always felt like I never ever want to act like I'm slumming it. Like I always like, even when I was doing those tiny Lifetime movies and some producer was like, who cares? I was like, this is all the directing I get. So I just
Right.
have to do my best. Like I'm always trying to like figure out whether it's the people you're working with or the place you're working in or the camera or the gear or there's always something cool about being on set, like
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
pretty hard for it to be awful, 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 like across the board, like there's always
Right.
something
Right.
good to get out of it. And I learned so much on 5 and the producing director there, Brian Spicer, was incredibly gracious with me. Not all people that I shadowed were, she
Right.
was really supportive and
Right.
I credit like Glenn Geller, who was the head of CBS at the time. He was like, you are going to get a show. And I was like,
Right.
it was amazing. It changed my life.
Now, so 2 questions from there. What were like, I don't know, the top 2 things you learned on that show? And then the second question is, not everyone that you observe as a director is like open. So I don't know, what are some of the horror stories of like the worst kind of director to shadow?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I think what I learned on 5 which now obviously I know, but back then I thought that like a DP would sit down and shot list with you and figure it all out with you. And like, that's just not how episodic works. Like you have to do all that work. And then,
Yeah.
you bring it to the DP and they'll collaborate or whatever, but like you are literally the shot list and the blocking manager. Like that's
Right.
really your main job. And I think I kept sort of like leaning to that DP and thinking, oh, how do you do it? And what would you do? And how would you do it? And what would you do? And he like couldn't
Right.
be bothered. Like he was like,
Did you have a prepping DP, or was that DP shooting every episode?
no, I had a prepping DP. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, it's like, I think what happens with shows like that, like they were really deep in their seasons and like those guys had worked on really big stuff. And then like they went out to Hawaii and they like were working on a 24 episode a year show, like he wasn't going
Right.
to do my work for me, certainly. But like, I remember feeling like, oh my God, why are you not helping me? It
Right.
was so big, right, for me.
Right.
But in retrospect, I'm just like, oh, that's kind of how it is. Like, that's just how episodic run.
Yeah. Especially broadcast.
Yeah, especially broadcast. Like they could do it in their sleep. They're not going to sit down and like create something special for you. So that, and then in terms of like people that I shadowed that it was a bummer. I think everybody for the most part was pretty gracious. There were times when people would assume I was like a student and I was like 40 years old and I was like, how are you like what? And also like anyone who was basically like dismissive of you and putting you somewhere that you weren't even, like I was already a director when I came to set. So it was very difficult to like feel like you weren't legitimate somehow or that you were like an annoyance. So yeah, so a few times I guess there was like that situation, but like mostly it was just my own ego and getting past like how frustrating it was to have to shadow after like having done 4 features and like Todd Holland actually like shook me and was like, I was like, I'm not even going to Hawaii. I can't afford it. I'm not going to Hawaii. And he was like, go to Hawaii. Like, what is the matter with you? And now I actually tell people like, it's so hard to keep jumping through those hoops because you just feel like at that point when you haven't gotten paid and you're broke, and I had 2 kids at that point and we couldn't afford cheese. And like, if I went to Hawaii for 3 weeks, that meant who was going to be like covering my husband or whatever.
Right.
And I say now, like, you never know when that loop is going to be the last loop. So you just got to keep jumping through, like,
Yeah. It's almost like, and I'm a broken record and I always have to say to the loyal listener, sorry, you're hearing some of the same anecdotes, but I'm always talking about the like the sooner you can embrace the idea of meetings, the further your career will go, because the meeting is a fundamental currency of your career, because the people are a fundamental currency of your career. And
that's a great way to think about it.
We're not all actors like you who can do it so well, but like finding a way to like make it not like a a buzzkill. Like it is
A
a
chore.
thing because
Yeah.
a chore, right? Because there's a point where I've learned, I know like there's a point where I looked up and I'm like, oh wow, those 3 years of meetings are now paying off.
Yeah.
Ah, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
So along that line of thought, like when did you notice that your whatever amount of years of meetings or farming or whatever, it was that you were doing began to transition into something tangible that you could see happen?
Yeah. I definitely think there's been a couple of points, but like if I look at that Hawaii 5 leading up to that, I literally called every writer I knew that was working in television and said, could I take you to lunch? Could I pick your brain? Could I come visit your set?
Mm,
You're doing it so well. I love what you're working on. I really want to work for you. So when I got that second 5 Wendy Miracle, who was the showrunner on Arrow at the time, along
mhm,
with Mark Guggenheim, who's brothers with Eric Guggenheim, who was showrunning
mhm,
5 they brought me in to replace a director that had gotten fired for Me Too stuff. Like literally, like I
mhm.
got the call on a Tuesday, I flew on Thursday, and I started Friday.
Oh, the
And
irony.
oh, the irony, right? And not lost on me. And so it was like, all of those relationships, even more than just like a regular studio meeting, have paid off. So even Lee Eisenberg, who ran Little America and ran Lessons in Chemistry, he was an
Right.
assistant on The Mind of the Married Man. So I've known
Wow.
Lee since
Wow. I
2001,
love it.
and
I love
we
it.
wrote a spec script together for that show when we were
Mm,
babies, right? And so like, when I got the chance to come work with him, it was so wonderful. Like it was like a
right.
homecoming. And same
Right.
with Sean Hayter, who was running Little America. She was burned out from Coda, from like, she had all this stuff going on with Coda that year. But I had
Mhm,
interviewed her. This is crazy because you never know where it's going to come from. Sean
right.
and I knew each other from a group called Film Fatale,
Mhm.
like years and years ago. And she had asked me about shooting while pregnant because she was pregnant
Uh-huh.
shooting Tallulah and was nervous. And I'd hid it from my producers on my second movie, my second pregnancy, because I was
Right.
nervous that they were going to fire me. And anyway, so we bonded over this thing. Years later, Alliance of Women Directors invited me to interview Sean for the release of her movie. And we had this wonderful conversation. And so when
Right.
Sean wasn't available to do her episode, she'd actually never seen my work, but she
Mm,
called and said, hey, you're so smart. Would you want to come and replace me on this? And then she watched my work and it was like, okay, good.
right.
She's great. But like,
Right.
how insane that like something that actually wasn't for my career did
Yeah.
so much for my career, right? It's like, so it's like what you're saying. It's like being in
Yeah.
relationship with other people you respect, and that creative kind of back and forth is also like an
Right.
invaluable part. And then, by the way, Lynette Howell, who produced Wander Darkly, who I've also known since I was 22 or something. Like we were running a youth theater in Los Angeles together when we met, So like
Wow.
I was a script supervisor for her on her first short film. So it's
Right.
like those
Right.
people that we watched each other come up, and then you end up like, we've wanted to work together for so long. It's so gratifying to
Yeah.
be able to like come back to those relationships.
I
But
can't
have
tell
you
you.
found, yeah, I'm curious if you have found that it's more like the official meetings that you get that end up paying
Yeah.
off like years later.
It's, I think if you force me to put it into like a, kind of clear thesis, I feel like it's the relationships that kind of get you rolling
Yeah.
to land in a place where the official meetings people feel comfortable taking the baton. And so, like there are so many people, that I think along the way, like Kenya Barris hired me first, and I met him first trip to LA in '02. Issa Rae hired me for the show within the show on Insecure season 2. And she had been like the final guest on a podcast I did from 2009 to 2011. Like,
I know.
so
I heard
like
you guys
all,
talking about that in the
like
show. It's so crazy.
it's so, and I mean, there's just so many folks that I know where it's like, man, I remember when I met you in my dorm at NYU.
Yeah.
So it's really cool, like A, to watch that happen, but B, to get to those moments where you can actually collaborate with one another, because
Mm.
we all just want to work with our friends and with
I
people
know.
that we know the experience is going to be enjoyable and rewarding on top of the creative, aspirations we might have.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's funny. I think like bigger the jobs get, the more meetings they entail. And so like, and the more sort of like, I always say to my reps, circle the wagons. So like,
Yeah.
who knows somebody at the studio, who knows somebody at the network, who's really tight with the producer, who knows the actor. Like we just like, go in full charge when I really, really want something.
Now it's looking at the TV because I'm looking at what you've done. Like you've mentioned Hawaii Five-0, Arrow, Batwoman, Fantasy Island, Little America, which sounds like it led to lessons in chemistry to some degree.
Yeah, I would think so.
How did you ever find that the executives that you were meeting with were beginning to profile you as a certain kind of director?
What's hard is I don't have a clean profile. And I know that consistently from these meetings. They're like, your resume is so diverse. Like, help us know
Right.
what to look for you. And it is because, like I was building 2 careers. Like I was building this TV career and taking anything I could get. So started on this action path
Right.
and learned I love blowing stuff up. I didn't know I was going to love all that. Like that stuff is
Right.
great,
Right.
and really fun to manage. And then on the other side, I was doing like Wander Darkly, which is this really intimate, but visually wild and very specific, romantic thriller. And
Right.
so what I say now is like trying to help them understand me is like, I'm trying to build a brand for myself and say like, what I really want to do is find a way to pair these things, like to pull them together. So like intimate relationships and like
Right.
great world building and really personal state. So like
Right.
that's the thing I'm like starting to talk about. But
Right.
it's, yeah, I feel like that's still evolving for me. Like I'm still trying to figure out that. I think it's really smart to have that. But as an artist, I resist the box a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you
that's
feel about
very
that? Because I feel like you've done such a good job at starting in one spot and then you've really gotten to navigate into other, from comedy into drama.
Yeah. It's interesting because, well, first for everybody listening, I just you should go back and write down what Kara just said, because that breakdown of what you are trying to do in molding these 2 different worlds or types of storytelling is so specific that it does exactly what you're saying, which is it will help them understand how to use you to their benefit, because it's always symbiotic. For me, it was the comedy focus in the beginning, just really trying to like get them, first of all, get jobs.
Yeah.
And then get hired back. And I say all the time, I was fortunate to get into families where they had multiple shows. And because they liked me, they were bringing me back. And I was the first few years, I might have been doing 15 episodes a year, because it was like, hey, we got 3 Blackish for you. Here's 4 Always Sunny, and things were kind of getting interspersed. But yeah, that in the beginning, it was very much what you're saying. Like, what do I have to say? How can I take what I've done and communicate it in a way that can make you understand that I can do A, this one thing that you want me to do, but also B, if we're going to talk bigger picture, I could do these other things. And that's a constant journey, because now I'm finishing a feature and we're about to go out with that. And I've made 2 features, but
Congrats.
they don't know me for that. So
No,
it's
and
like,
it doesn't count.
exist.
It doesn't count. Yeah, it's weird. Like I have found that in terms of pilot directing, like the conversation about, oh, but she hasn't done a streaming pilot, so we can't consider her, even though I did a backdoor pilot for Volante. Like just or an indie film that I've done, or like the specificity of what they want to say counts.
Right.
Which like I hate to say it, but I do think it's worse for marginalized communities. Like I think that often, like, I don't know, like maybe white guys are able to like be seen as their potential, and that, people from historically marginalized communities are seen as like, well, whatever you've done, I guess that you've proven you could do that. And so like pushing that to see what I'm capable of, that I haven't done yet, that's the hard thing. And even, I was at Sundance in 2020 And I really thought that my TV would change. I thought I'd be like, yeah, let's meet with HBO. Let's go do like more
Right.
elevated streaming, whatever. And it just did not translate. Like, and I had a big feature bump at that point, but like on the TV side, it didn't translate. And so like it was really Sean giving me a chance at Little America that then
Right.
got, or that then got me lessons in chemistry that I think now has like creaked that door open.
Right.
But I'm still punching up. I'm still, fighting
Right.
to like continue to do bigger, more elevated content.
This is Linda Lowy, casting director, and you are watching Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman.
Transitions, A Director's Journey and Motivational Handbook is Pete Chapman's book from Michael Weezy Productions. The reviews are in. Greg Berlanti says, "There's a reason why everyone who works with Pete falls in love with his work. The lessons he imparts here are invaluable. Do yourself a favor and read it cover to cover." From Sarah Gamble, "Pete's sharing gold nuggets that will spare you a ton of wasted time and help you channel your drive, talent, and ambition in the most productive way." And from Jesse Williams, "This business has everything to do with preparation and expectations. Transitions grounds lessons in reality while empowering our artistry to run free. Not an easy balance to execute." Transitions, A Director's Journey and Motivational Handbook is available on Amazon and anywhere else you get your books. Don't forget about your mom and pop shops, people.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is sponsored by the good folks at Scriptation. Scriptation is the Emmy Award-winning app for production that allows you to mark up scripts, transfer notes, generate breakdowns, and so much more. Personally, I use Scriptation daily on every production that I'm involved with. While directing episode 106 of ABC's High Potential, I was able to take advantage of Scriptation's new tagging feature to keep track of the many elements layered into my episode. Morgan, played by Caitlin Olsen, experiences visions that offer an alternate take on what the police think they know as a case develops, and these interesting pops are full of new information, wardrobe, props, stunts, etc., that require a heightened level of organization to realize your director's vision. This is just one of the ways I use the incredible features inside of Scriptation. Go to scriptation.com/Pete to get an exclusive 20% off Scriptation's premium toolkit, Scriptation Industry Pro. Let's talk about lessons in chemistry. So now I know the evolution of how you came to the project. You did 2 episodes?
Yeah, I did the last 2 for them.
And so we both worked with Jason. I worked with him on Unprisoned, Jason Oldak, the cinematographer.
Yeah.
And nothing but good things to say about you. So I'll have to rope
That's
him
nice.
into an
I punished
interview.
Jason. So like it was a hard shoot and I was relentless. I'm just a street. I was
Now, in
really,
what
I was
way?
like, Jason, get up. Like he'd be like at the dit and I'm like, this is Brie Larson. Oh, this is like a bestseller. Come on, we're going to do it better. Like, I
Right,
just was
right.
always pushing. I pushed him a lot. And he's also from Long Island. And so our love of the Mets, I think, kept us like
Yeah,
alive.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it kept us like close. But I gave him a little bit of a hard time on that show. So I'm glad we're still good love cousins, like we're still. But he did, by the way, his work is stunning. Like,
Yeah.
stunning on both episodes. He got nominated for an ASC award. They put him up for an Emmy. Like
Yeah.
I could not be more thrilled with the work. So yeah, he's a good pal.
Yeah. No, he's great. Now, this is not the podcast where we do like the tell me about the show, but I would love to know, what your episodes meant to you, if that's a fair question. And
Totally.
and then I love to get into I'll do one question at a time. What did the episodes mean to you?
Okay, so what a great question. On episode 107, which we followed, for anyone who knows the show, spoiler alerts ahead, but we follow Calvin life as a young kid, and he was an orphan, and like how he just became a scientist. That he was involved in like an illegal, gin running factory with this priest that like he figured out how to like make it more profitable for the priest. And so the
Right.
priest didn't ever let him leave. And like when his family kind of realized he was there, came to collect him, he like kept him. My grandfather on my mom's side was an Irish orphan in New York City in the early 30s. And so there was like a really personal connection to it for me. And it's a
Yeah.
really weird thing when the world brings you projects this way. So that it meant a lot to me to like represent that world of like a Catholic boys orphanage in the 1930s. Like I just found it like amazing that I had a chance to do that. And it was that was sort of the really personal thing for me about that one. The finale, there was two things that were like incredible for me. So I live in an area of LA called Harvard Heights, which is in West Adams. And like right across the street from me is Sugar Hill, where in the 60s, the freeway got, placed right through this historically African-American neighborhood of Los Angeles in a very deliberate way. I mean, this was like the Beverly Hills for Black Angelinos. Like incredible artists lived here. It was a beautiful, like, the way we think of like Pasadena now, that's what this neighborhood was. And Lee had put in the script that, like it was never in the book, but he was like, let's think about what would be going on in the rest of the world. So it's not just about Elizabeth Stott. And so they put the freeway like battle with Sugar Hill residents in the script. And I remember reading it and being like, nobody knows this history. And how is this landing? Like, I'm literally like, I can see the sign from my window. Like, how is this landing like in my lap? And so I was really honored to be able to tell that story. And Asia Naomi King, who played Harriet in the movie, who was kind of, the person leading that charge, was such an incredible actress. And turns out she went to UCSB. And we, it was like just having that connection with her was quite delightful. And she was just wonderful to work with. And so, so it's like, it's so funny because there's always something in the script that really feels like yours, like that somehow carving into your heart and like that you need
I
it.
almost tell me if I'm venturing too far, but it sounds like it's almost like that was you in the zone to a degree that we were talking about earlier, right? Like where taste met talent and execution, because you had this thing that was really like part of who you are. You were able to find it in the story, and then you were able to, make it happen.
Yeah. I think that's a lovely way to put it. And I hope so. I also feel like it's funny because you were talking about acting, and in some ways it feels like every job is pulling at like a different part of you. So like the part of me that when I go to Hawaii 5 and I talk about the fact that I had a big brother who was a surfer and we watched Red Dawn all the time. And like, that's what I grew up with. And like, that provides me context for exactly how to do 5 but then I go to Little America and I grew up in New York. And so it's a Belizean woman who's coming to a Hasidic community. And I'm like, oh, we lived in Pico Robertson for 5 years and I have a ton of, so it's like these different things that are these really little like stars in your universe that you get to go access. And I think that's the thing I love about this the most is the exploration, because it's like, I might know a little bit about the orphanage, but then I had to go dive into it, right? Then I had to go, like the prayer of it is to go dive into that world and try to make it as authentic as possible and to like live in that world and inhabit it. And and how lucky are we to do that? Like that's the best stuff, right?
Was there anything about that show that was like unique to your production experience? I.e., was like, did you have more time and more money than on anything you'd done before? Did they have more of a desire for cinematic look?
Yeah. I will say my experience both on Little America and Lessons were similar in that the creative process was so open to me. They were really pressed for scripts on Lessons. And so when I came in, I was very involved in the room with the writers. We were going back and forth on the draft, even, like giving me space to say, I know it's written this way to end the episode. I think you're going to be a lot happier if we end it this way. And they were like, great. Like there was just so much trust. And that is, I just live for it, like I just live to be able to like, you give me that faith. And then I'm not tempted to like control my shooting. Like I want to give you that privilege back when you're in the edit room. Like Bruce Paltrow said to me, like, you shoot this shit so they can only cut it one fucking way. But maybe Bruce Paltrow can do that. But like, But, there is a feeling of when you're being micromanaged that you can feel a little like I want to rebel a little bit. But when someone is really generous with me creatively on a set and is really giving me space to do my best work, I want to then give them space to do their best work in the back end too. Like I really want to honor the showrunner that gave me the space to do really good work. So that's what I would say is the best. I mean, those have certainly been some of my most gratifying episodic experiences. But then funny enough, like on Arrow too, like they were like, go make your indie movie. And like, they love for you to play it. Like, it just depends on like what camp you're in, Yeah.
And we were kind of talking about this offline before we started, but it's also like, and I think that maybe what governed my question about taste. There are so many different tastes coming at an episode, and the fact that what makes it to television even makes sense. You know what I mean? Like after like, like I'll argue, I'm making a number up and I hate when people do that, but like I'll argue 4 different styles of taste have been applied to that thing. And so,
it's so real.
Like standing on what you believe is of interest or works for something is the only compass and North Star that you can have. So yeah, I digress. I'll probably have talked more specifically about what's whirling in my mind on another episode, but
no, I think I get what you're coming at. It's like, I don't know, it's tying into something else for me too, which is like the amount of times you have to repeat yourself, and like your vision of what a dusty road might look like is different than like the 10 other people who said dusty road, and you thought you're all on the same page. And it's no discredit to you that like the wrong dusty road shows up 6 times, but you have to be like, no, guys, when I say dusty road, I think this, right? Like my taste, my brain, my vision is this one. And so it's an interesting process of like, can you align your vision of Dusty Road with the showrunner's vision of Dusty Road, with number 1 on the call sheet vision, with the studio's vision, with the network's vision? And can you convince them all that your Dusty Road is the best Dusty Road?
Right.
What I mean? Or align yourself with someone who has the say, like, and that navigation is a facet, and it's constant. That's like literally one slug line on a script, right?
Yeah.
Like that conversation is times a billion.
Right.
Of like,
and
what does it
so
mean
many,
for you?
And then you get that, and then you take that conversation to set, and then you've got an actor who just will not ever give that note. So now that changes it. And then, there's like this constant like adjustment. The metronome is actually offbeat because it can never settle into a constant, which is, it's
such
interesting.
a living, breathing organism, right? Like, and I think actually the challenge of that is, and the puzzle of it, and the constant like new figuring out how to, it's like whack-a-mole, that's actually what helps my brain. Like maybe it's ADD or something, but like that's the thing that I kind of get fueled by.
Yeah. And you have to really, my last soapbox on taste, but you really do have to like lean in and trust it. And I think that's like the journey of directing. Like you even mentioned, like, well, Bruce Paltrow can do that. Like, like I do think, there's always something that I'll do where I'm kind of like, everybody's kind of looking at me a little crazy about this shot. And then you know what happens? It's the promo for the, what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yes.
Or it's, I have another thing I'm literally thinking of that where like people are like, you really want to shoot outside the set looking in? And guess what?
Yeah.
It's the thumbnail for the episode.
Of course it is.
So like, it's always that kind of thing where you're like, just, stand by it. But even as much work as we've done, you'll stand by it and be like, I think so. Move on.
I have to say, the only thing that actually makes me feel better is hearing other directors that I respect so much talking about that moment. Like I remember on Wander Darkly, it's 2:30 in the morning. We're standing out at the marina in Palos Verdes. We're going to shoot dolphin. That's what we need to do. We have to go out with these guys and shoot these dolphins. And I hear the sound guy go, we're never going to find dolphins. And I'm like, yes, we are. We're going to find. And we found so many dolphins. Like, it's like you just have to believe like in
Right.
this thing that doesn't exist yet. And then you're manifesting it. And by the way, I can think of no better part of my work than like standing on a set somewhere, executing a shot that I wrote a year ago that brought us to this place that like is actually happening and goes the way I want it. Like it
Right.
is so powerful
Right.
to like see the plan work,
Right.
you know, and to like get people excited when they didn't think it was possible. To do the impossible is pretty great, you know? Like,
That goes back to your drawn classroom of characters. Like, here it
yeah.
is. Now that's the realization of it.
Yeah, it's a
Lifelong journey.
really, yeah, man, it's an addictive process. You dream something up and then you go make it in the real world. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Not for sure. You know, my documentary, my former life of doing documentary has forced me to evolve the question I'm going to ask you. And in the past, I might have tried to be more specific, but I feel like, you know, when I would do docs, the last question I would ask would be like, is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to make sure, you know, we talk about? And then every soundbite from the interview would literally come from that, because they'd be like thinking about making sure they've communicated and crystallized what their singular like thought might be. So I want to ask you about craft, and rather than try and be prescriptive, I'll ask you, if you were to talk about directing to, let's say, an emerging director, what are what are 3 things about the craft of directing or skills that exist in the director's toolkit that you find most important in being a successful director?
Okay, 3 tools in my toolkit that I think help me make a successful director. You know, it's funny. I will say one, I think, is like you were just saying, Pete, is really learning to trust your instincts. And that goes back to your taste. And to know that if you think it's good, it's good. And to not rely on like anybody else to be nodding in the background like a bobblehead giving you approval or permission, but
Right.
to trust like your instincts on how to talk to people in meetings, how to behave on set, how to treat other people, how to talk to that actor, how to give a note to your DP, how to frame a shot. If it doesn't look right, if it doesn't feel right, it's
Right.
not right. And I think that it's taken me a long time to like, sometimes I just don't, it's like, it's not right, but like, I don't say anything. And then later I'm like, I knew that wasn't right. Like, why didn't I say something? Like, I knew it was
Right.
off. So really quieting all those voices, because it can be so noisy and so many people have opinions. The other thing I would say is having some really trusted allies, like having people who are in your corner that you can talk to and get advice from, because there's always something hard you've never done.
Right.
If I have to go do motion control, I call somebody who's already done it, or I ask for an introduction to somebody who's already done it, not being afraid
Right.
to say I don't know,
Right.
and being open to learning all the time. And the last thing I will say is like a combo is hiring great people
Right.
and trusting them and over communicating with everybody all the time. Like those things like really, really matter. Over communicating here, just like let's say back. So here's what we all just decided. Here's what we're all going to do. And yeah, I think those things, right? It's such a collaborative medium, but you can't lose sight of your own vision. And that
Right.
balance is
Right.
the trick, right? Like knowing when to give and when to hold and when to fight and when to, you know, like go with the flow, when to let a mistake play out because it might be great.
Right.
Right. It's like
Right.
such a dance.
Right. Right.
It's such a dance, and not holding on too tight, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And nuance, you know, it's like being comfortable with nuance and uncomfortability and, you
Oh
know,
my gosh, yeah.
and discovery, because so much of it is, you know, and I don't know why I'm talking, because this is your question, but like,
No, I love it.
feels like,
Please.
it feels like so much we get I feel like there can be a tendency to to crystallize around the script in a way
Mhm.
that makes it like there's the idea like that it's like perfect, but it's
Right.
actually just a point from which to discover more.
Yeah.
And when you don't enter each scene with that open kind of accessibility to allow there to be some discovery, you will miss beautiful moments.
That's such a great way to think about it. Like, I do think the script can be dead if you don't like elevate off the page, right? Like, there has to be this weird magic thing that like lifts it and then it's going to
Right.
transform.
Right.
It might not be better. It might be worse. It might reveal that it was never good in the first place. Like, it's just like you don't
Yeah.
know, like, and
Yeah.
I think I say a lot like, let's take a bash at it or like,
Hmm.
let's take a swing at this and see how it looks. Like, let's try
Right.
it. Let's play. I say those
Right.
kinds of words a lot. Like, why not? Like, yeah, let's do
Mhm.
one where, like I try to keep it really like a little fluid because the opposite, I think that thing when an actor comes even too prepared always
Right.
bums me out. Like they have a really specific idea and they're like, they're nervous. You're going to give them a note, like they know
Right.
what they want to
Right.
do. And you're like, that's amazing. Also, let's try it not like that. And they're like, you
Right.
know,
Yeah. There's this. This is it. This is what it's gonna be.
this is it. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying
And
not to
it's
over
interesting.
intellectualize. Yeah.
It's interesting too because the in solidarity with directors, right? We have we have a vision too,
Yeah.
and yet, but we are probably in TV more so most the people who are most m- having to be the most malleable with that vision,
Yeah.
whether it's time or other perspectives or politics, and that's just the nature of the job. But it's an interesting part of it.
But I gotta tell you, so I was talking to somebody, I've been saying this a lot during meetings. There is like, because I go back and forth. I do broadcasts and then I do cable and I do indies and
Right.
whatever. So I've had to kind of march in step with different abilities, styles, expectations.
Yeah.
But it feels to me like there's something that's gone on with like what's expected of directors in some shows where they're
Mhm.
like, they just want that master, the mini master, the overs, the close ups, the profiles, maybe if you're lucky, and like peace out.
Right.
And they just want you to do the standard thing.
Right.
And I think I'll say this as a writer, I think it comes from a writer's need to like have all the lines covered and to be able to change it, everything in post. But to me, I feel like the visual language is as important as all the things that those writers are building. So like we're watching these shows at home and you have all this exciting content, this exciting ideas and these exciting characters, but you're watching it like the same notes over and over and over. I
Right.
think it makes people tune out. I think
Right.
it makes us feel like we're on second screen, like versus watching a Nolan film or a Scorsese film or like
Right.
a Greta Gerwig film, like anything that you feel like is carrying you
Right.
through a visual story based on character, based on,
Right.
moment. And like not all TV directors can come in and craft a
Right.
camera blocking that is going to feel elevated and, specific to the scene. And not all shows have time for that. But it
Right.
does feel to me like the directors shows would benefit if directors were empowered to block and stage scenes in a specific way, as opposed to in
Yeah.
a way that you could cut it every way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my like
Man,
soapbox for the day.
I mean, that's like literally like I'm going to like print that up on t-shirt.
We're gonna send it out as a manifesto. I'm gonna Jerry Maguire that all over town. Episodic directors could be used for good,
But it's true though, because sometimes it's like, oh, like let's be on their face for that moment, and it's like, I get that, but also like, I know as a viewer, like there are things that I will pop, like an interesting shot kind of re-energizes my commitment to the scene in a weird way, right? And, you know, I think the sad reality of it all is that, you know, when you hear the things that people like, both in front of the camera, behind it, in the tall skyscrapers in this town and in New York, it's often really not the reflective of what folks want you to make, right? Like folks don't love the shows that are kind of reflective of some of the notes you might get. And audiences they're so fluent. They watch everything. And I wonder what will, we've had the golden age of TV, which has changed it, but I wonder like if there's going to be another kind of elevation of like, you know, you can really get specific storytelling for TV as well on a variety of things.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. Well, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have?
No, man, we covered it.
We
Is that
covered
the word?
It's covered.
We did it. That was the last mantra was my thing. That was mine.
I felt like that might have been that was a perfect place to land. Well, this has been awesome. I mean, I don't even have any more questions. I'll tell folks to go watch Lessons in Chemistry. Watch all the things you've done, but that if you're looking for shows that are current and are about to be on the awards season pedestal, go check that out and see some great work. And I thank you again for joining and spending your time chatting with little old me.
Thanks, Pete. This is awesome. Really great chat.
Thank you. What's up, people? This is Pete Chapman. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter via @PeteChapman. Follow the pod on IG via @Let'sShootWithPeteChapman, and hit up our mailbag with questions, suggestions, or hey, donations if you're feeling like it via let'sshootwithpetechapman@gmail.com. And just in case you need to know how to spell it, that's Pete with the last name CHATMON. Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is produced and edited by the multi-talented cut creator Tristan Nash. Assistant produced by the young mogul Jada George, and features the wonderfully gifted Kelly McCreary as our announcer. It's written by yours truly, but I mostly come up with these questions on the fly, which you've probably noticed. Go ahead and get your podcast swag via PeteChapman.com and leave a review on iTunes if so inclined. That shit matters. Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is sponsored by Scriptation. Scriptation makes it easy to go paperless on set, increase your productivity, and save hours of time. Let's Shoot listeners get a special discount on Scriptation Industry Pro. Go to scriptation.com/Pete to learn more. All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. Next week, join us for a conversation with director and friend of the pod, Keith Powell, where we will be speaking candidly, anecdotally, openly, and quite frankly about how we booked several of our episodes as directors, episodes of television, y'all. For everyone that wants to know how you get the job as a director, this is your episode. And it's a special craft episode opportunity for y'all. So in the meantime, stay safe, spread love, and keep creating.